Welcome back, everybody, to Sydney Spin Big Ten Edition. And it's sunny skies, great weather, time for softball season. There is nothing like it here in the spring. And last weekend, I spent opening weekend down in Clearwater, Florida. I got to watch a lot of the Big Ten teams compete. Also, some of the best teams across the country within Texas Tech, Tennessee. We will touch on all of them, but also the rest of the Big Ten teams who were spread out across the country. Now, as I break it down, I want to say what's special about this 2025 season that I noticed already in week one, being at the fields in Clearwater, Florida, also calling softball for Flow Softball down at the Puerto Vallarta College Classic 2025, is that the parity is bigger than ever. We are seeing that because there's only 30 Division One teams left undefeated, only around 5 to 6 that were in our Softball America top 25. If that doesn't say already that it is anybody's game, and that's why you have to play all 7 innings. But we saw top ranked teams rolling through people, and then we'll wake up the next day, drop the Sunday game or the second game on Saturday. That goes to show it is anybody's game, and we're seeing that in week one. So let me catch you up about all the crazy madness that happened. I want to start with my two Big Ten teams that came out hot and proved right away why they are some of the top teams in the nation. I have to start with my Oregon Ducks. When we talked to Coach Lombardi, she emphasized how she had the most depth within her pitching staff out of all of the years she's been there as she enters her 7th year. But it was her hitting that made history and will go down in the record books as the best opening weekend in Oregon softball program history. And mind you, they've had Women College World Series teams, they've had super regional teams. But let me tell you why this weekend was so special. Already, they're 5-0 and they scored 73 runs in 5 games. An absurd amount of 14.6 runs a game, 10 home runs in opening weekend. That is so incredibly hard to do because the last how many months you spent hitting live off of your pitchers and your pitchers only. And to be able to go into a game situation for the first time since June of last year, excuse me, you go and you're that on time with so many new arms. Absolutely incredible for the Ducks. Not only that, you had Emma Cox, who was freshman of the week for Big Ten. She hit 500 within 18 at-bats and is tied for most on the team right now with 2 home runs. Absolutely incredible. We touched a little bit how pitching was going to be their strength. Lindsey Grain, the transfer from Virginia Tech, already 3-0 on the season with 17 strikeouts. And then Stacy Chambers stepped up 2-0 with 23 Ks in only 10 innings. I mean, the max was 30, so only 7 people were able to put the ball in play. So the Oregon Ducks are out rolling and showing why they should be a top 25 contender on every single poll right now across the country. For UCLA, they went to the Women's College World Series, probably the most improved team when you look at from week one to the last week and where they finished in Oklahoma City. They returned almost everybody. Not only that, they bring in the top recruiting class in the nation, and you saw why they've been talked about the last how many months, as in their first 5 games of the season, they had 5 run rules. I mean, pitching, defense, offense, everything was firing on all cylinders for them. But I want to give a little kudos to the 3 pitchers who are through, starting off with Taylor Tinsley, who is one of Softball America's 4 stars of the week. And it is because she went 7 innings, had 18 strikeouts, 1-0 start the year, a 0 ERA alongside her counterpart within Caitlin Terry. But she had just over 60 pitches. No walks, incredibly efficient in pounding the strike zone, something UCLA is going to look to use her. And not only that, I mentioned Caitlin Terry went 2-0. You're bringing in Addison Fisher, who is somebody that everybody needs to know, not only in the Big Ten, but college softball. She was the #1 recruit in the class of 2025. And in her freshman season, she showed exactly why, going 2-0 herself on the weekend. Talking about a little bit of the bats, Jordan Woolery, Megan Grant, and Sienna Curro, all with 2 home runs for the Bruins. And then going from my 2 teams who started hot to my 2 teams who they have a bunch of new faces you need to learn quickly. And I'm going to start with Northwestern Wildcats because in their freshman star, Kaylee Avasado, already in her freshman week campaign, She's hitting number 3 for the Wildcats. She started bottom of the order game 1. By the last 2 games, she showed why she should be in that 3 hole. Not only that, now she's the starting shortstop for the Wildcats as Bridget Donahue moved from short last season to third base as they anchor down the left side. But she's leading the Wildcats right now in batting average. She hit .563 and was a huge reason why the Wildcats were able to pick up their first ranked win of the season over the Duke Blue Devils. And talking about new faces, you may remember them, but you have to be reminded of Grace Nito and Lauren Boyd for the Wildcats. Both of them has been over 600 days since they last played the field. They last played in my last game at Northwestern. If that gives you any instinct of the 2 years that they have just dedicated themselves to getting back healthy so they could be back on the field, but also the work that they did in being leaders from the dugout did not go unnoticed by the entire Wildcats culture these last 2 years. But for Grace Nito to be off 622 days since her last start, she stepped in the batter's box and hit .364 and started at second base in her opening weekend. And then Lauren Boyd, who the Wildcats had not seen take the field and take the mound in 623 days. She has an ERA right now of .276 and completed that huge win over Duke. So for the Wildcats, it's Kaylee Avasado and then bringing back Grace Nito and Lauren Boyd. And then I'm going to take us to the Buckeyes because Ohio State has one of the most dynamic freshmen we have seen in the Big Ten in a long time. As not only did she make her debut for being Big Ten freshman, but she was Big Ten Player of the Week in opening weekend of college softball. And that's Lauren Booty, who went 3-0 in her college career, began her Buckeye career with a no-hitter against NC Central, and just somebody who is going to be exciting for the Big Ten in college softball to watch. She had 25 strikeouts in 12 innings and had 0 runs earned allowed against her. Not only that, Ohio State, also Jasmine Burns walked away with Big Ten honors as she hits .714 for a batting average, over a 1 slugging percentage as she had 7 RBIs. And the Buckeyes finished up with a perfect 4-0, one of 3 Big Ten teams who walked away unscathed and remained perfect in opening weekend. And then I want to take us to the category where I labeled as the biggest upside from what we saw in week 1, the teams that I think are going to continue to grow. And you have to start with Nebraska. Last year, they lose Jordy Ball in opening weekend, this time in 2024. They go on to have a solid year, but not a year any of them predicted to have. Well, now Nebraska brings back Jordy Ball. They bring in 6 transfers from the portal, a ton of talent who returned last year, and they had an unbelievable opening weekend. They go off and they start with a win, and then they knock off a top 5 team in Tennessee, who a lot of people think Carlin Pickens and the Bulls will end up in Oklahoma City at the end of the year. And that was when we knew Jordy Ball was back from that 2023 National Championship MVP year, and she was back to herself pitching and also hitting-wise, as we saw her slug out a home run as well. The only 2 losses that they had, they lost in the 7th inning against Texas Tech. A Nigeri Kennedy 3-run home run bomb led off the kind of the turn of it for Texas Tech to get some momentum, and they end up walking off on an error up the middle to score 2 in the bottom of the 7th. So again, Texas Tech, top 25 team. Nebraska was right there, battled with them until the end. The same with their second loss of the weekend was against a ranked Mississippi State, who showed a lot of upside in week number 1 as well. So Ava Kuzak, the transfer from Wisconsin, starting shortstop now for the Huskers. She was one of my go-to players to watch this weekend and did not disappoint with her 2 home runs and hitting just nearly 500 average-wise. Jordy Ball, we talked about her, but just to put some numbers, she was everything as advertised, hitting 400 with 1 home run and 17 strikeouts between her first 2 starts for the Huskers, a team that's going to be on the map all season long. And then the other team is the Washington Huskies. That is somebody you didn't know what to expect. You knew Heather Tarr has a rich history of leading them to championship levels at the Pac-12 and also the Women's College World Series and winning national titles. But they brought in 16 new faces. There was a lot of people with a lot of question marks, and I think they showed people what type of team they can become. And that's why Softball America had them in their stock up, stock down report as a big stock up. Even though they left their tournament with a 2-3 record, they over exceeded a lot of people's expectation, beating an Arizona team who's incredibly tough this year and hanging with Alabama, who was in the Women's College World Series last year for 2 games up until the very final innings. A few faces that really impressed me in opening weekend was Morgan Reimer and Alexis DeBoer. They had some of the best weekends. Reimer threw a team high of 16.1 innings with a 1.71 ERA. DeBoer had 3 home runs and a team high of 1.251 OPS. And it'll be interesting to see how this Husky team can develop over the course of the year as they start to learn how to play amongst one another in just Washington softball. But a big highlight for them, even though the record might not demonstrate it, there's a lot to look forward to that's happening in Seattle, Washington. And then my 2 teams who are going to go under the category of most improved in week 1 from last season. I'm going to start off with the Wisconsin Badgers. I was incredibly impressed as they went 4-1 on the weekend after having a difficult season last year. They ended up finishing in a bright spot in the Big Ten tournament, but it wasn't the type of year Coach Yvette Healy wanted to have. She went back to her roots in bringing in Midwest kids who are speedy, who are gritty, and who played solid defense. And you saw that right away with them picking up 4 wins. Gabby Salo pitched in 3 games, walked away with a 3-0 record to start off her season. Their only loss came in their very first game of the tournament against the talented Ole Miss team. And then the other one has to be Maryland. Again, another team who did not have the season that they wanted last year or in the previous years. They lost a stud pitcher in Courtney Weiss, but they were able to be 3-2 in opening weekend. One of the best tournaments in the country is always the Kajawa Classic in Tempe, Arizona, where you face some of the very best teams, and Maryland handled them very well as they beat a ranked Cal the first time around and a talented Miami, Ohio, who shocked the nation last year with 160 home runs. So for Maryland, you're walking away feeling really happy with what you accomplished in week 1 and where you could grow throughout the rest of the season. So Wisconsin, Maryland, most improved from where I saw from 2024 to opening weekend in 2025. And then 2 teams who I had so much hope and expectations for in week 1, they got off to a bit of a slow start. And I hate to say that because they still have the utmost confidence in both programs. But we can't not talk about the Michigan Wolverines, who were the 2024 Big Ten tournament champions last season. They went 2-3 in opening weekend, which was something nobody expected. And the 2 wins came from Lauren Durkowski being absolutely perfect, throwing 17 scoreless innings. However, there's no secret that the rest of the pitchers who were in the other 2 games, they all walked away with an ERA north of 5. So there's a little bit of question marks. Where can other arms besides Durkowski really step up? But the biggest thing is they need to find a way to score more. In their first 5 games, they scored only 7 runs. Again, a big challenge after only facing your pitchers the last how many months, but something the Wolverines are going to be really focused on in this week before preparing for week 2 is just how can they get those bats going and how can they get other arms to complement a very talented Lauren Durkowski. Penn State is the other one we all had great expectations for, as one of the top pitchers in the nation last year was freshman Bridget Nemeth. She was Big Ten Freshman of the Year. She was absent, only through 1 outing, very short innings, most believed due to injury from everything that I've heard. So wishing her a speedy recovery. But it was very noticeable that when the sophomore right-hander and Nemeth was absent, the Lions started off 1-4. As Bridget goes, so do the Lions go. So for them, they're going to be looking to get her healthy and find other ways to win in the meantime. And as for everybody else, because we have 17 teams in the Big Ten now, there's a lot of teams to keep track of from West Coast to East Coast to Midwest. Let's start with Indiana, because even though they didn't fall into any of my categories, they had an incredibly successful weekend. They went 4-1 in Miami, Florida. Their only loss was the first game of the season. It was 3-4 against the talented FIU team. That was surprising a lot of people on opening weekend. Taylor Minnick, who we talked to in our Big Ten Media Days, off to a dominant start, hitting 500 with 9 RBIs. And then Janaea Berry went 2-0 on the weekend, somebody you're going to see more in the circle for them as she looks to complement a Brianna Copeland, who has been dominating the Big Ten for the last 4 years. Iowa, they came extremely close. I was recording with my phone as I thought they were going to get their first top 15 ranked win since 2018, as they were in an incredible back and forth duel against Missouri, who showed up and showed out in opening weekend. They had them down 2-1, down to their very last out, a ground ball back to the pitcher, just an overthrow to first base with 2 outs, both runners one came around to score to tie the game, and the very next pitch was a wild pitch that allowed them to walk it off. So if you're an Iowa team, devastating. There is nothing to get that yucky feeling out of your heart, but I hope the Hawkeyes walk away realizing they were toe-to-toe with a very incredible team within the Missouri Tigers. But they finished up their weekend going 2-1. For the Purdue Boilermakers, they started off opening weekend 2-4 on the season. They faced an incredible Texas A&M team in College Station. So for them to even just be around in a crowd that had 8,000 people every single day, that's the only way to replicate what a regional and super regional feels like. So you have to walk away with a lot of learning lessons, but also telling your teams this is what it's like to get to the NCAA tournament. These are the environments you have to thrive on to make it. So for them to get that experience already in week 1, there's no learning lesson like it. Minnesota, they went 1-3. Also in the Tempe, Arizona tournament, their one win came against the Miami of Ohio. They will be back competing in the Boca Raton, Florida tournament this upcoming weekend. Illinois went 1-4. Michigan State went 1-4. They will go on the road to Athens, Georgia. And Rutgers went 1-4 after winning their first game against Cleveland State. Now, that was a lot of running down for 17 teams, but I want everyone to be excited around the buzz of this conference. You look at the ranked matchups that Northwestern was able to win against Duke, that Nebraska was able to win against Tennessee. The talent in the Big Ten is absolutely there between how well Oregon came out, striking the bats, and UCLA with their dominant pitching performance. This conference has an incredible upside. And for the Michigans, the Penn States, the Rutgers, the Marylands, as they all work to continue to grow this conference as well from all coasts of the country. I'm thrilled to see. I hope you guys are excited to see as we continue to check in. And on these upcoming weekends, I will be bringing a player on one of the teams who did well off the weekend. And so we could have a little insight look into what their program looks like. But for those who also watched our Softball America Big Ten Media Days this last week before regular season, if you missed a single interview, I promise you're going to want to go back and to check it out. You could find that on the YouTube page for Softball America where you're watching this. Otherwise, we have all of them available on our Twitter. You go to media, and if you scroll through, you'll be able to find all of the live interviews, find your favorite teams, find teams you're curious about. I learned so much about these players and these coaches, and it only made me continue to fall in love with this conference more. And as we wrap up, the Big Ten teams all released yesterday their BTN games that are going to be on TV. So check out your favorite team schedules. Mark on your calendar when they have their 3 to 5 games, as Nebraska has the most BTN games scheduled right now with 5, Oregon with 4, Washington with 4, and then UCLA, Washington, and Northwestern with 3. However, there's 7 wild card games as we get closer to crowning our Big Ten 2025 championship. So keep your eyes out to see which games get picked up by BTN as you make sure you are tuning in all season long. I truly believe 2025 is going to be the best time for the Big Ten Conference. I cannot wait to take you alongside with me. Make sure you check out all of my updates on X at Sydney_Supple, Supple. But thank you all for tuning in to opening weekend of Sydney Spin, as I'm excited as we delve into this incredible 2025 season. And we only have 114 days left to go before the Women's College World Series, so we cannot waste a single moment. I will see you guys next week.